Welcome to this week's episode of Beyond the Scalpel podcast. This week we had Eric Tse from Allergan Aesthetics. Eric is the general manager of the Canadian operations of Allergan, and we had a conversation about Eric's background, what brought him to this point in his career, and what he sees as the future of aesthetics, particularly with regards to Allergan. Enjoy this conversation. This was a lot of fun.
Dr. Yazdani.
Hi, Eric. How are you doing?
Hey, great to see you in not person, but you know what I mean? Virtual at least.
Well, I can't see you yet.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I see that. Sorry.
Yeah, is your video on? Ah, there you are.
There you go.
Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm well. Listen, I apologize. Thanks for your flexibility and your patience with me as I tried to find the right time. I got pulled into that meeting, so really appreciate your flexibility there.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm just thrilled that you were able to join me.
Absolutely. Enjoying it.
So Eric, just to start, I know we said this before, but your name. So I pronounce your name Eric J, but you don't pronounce it Eric J.
I don't pronounce it Eric J. I know some do. It's Eric Tse, like say it like say.
Yeah. So what's the proper way to say it though? Is that, I mean, obviously the proper way is the way you're saying it.
Well, I mean, I think it's not an English name, obviously. So I think it's been bastardized when it's come over to North America or outside of China. So I have pronounced as J, and so some families do it that way. Others pronounce it Say. So I don't think there's necessarily a right way. It's been adapted, over the decades and the centuries.
Right. Well, I mean, it's the same with Persian name. I mean, any really immigrant family or any kind of name of a family that's not American or not Canadian or English will find that there's some, as you say, bastardization of their name. But I do find it interesting how names are properly pronounced in your mother language versus how in English we start to mispronounce it. But
yeah, exactly.
And Eric, you are the head of the Canadian operations of Allergan. But what is your official title?
General Manager, Allergan Aesthetics in Canada.
Right. And how's the hierarchy of Allergan work then? The head office is in the United States.
Correct. Yeah. So our global office is in the U.S. And then we have two regions, actually more than that, but two higher geographical regions, which are the U.S. and international. So everything outside the U.S. And then within there's different regions, of which one of them is called the WEC, Western Europe and Canada. And we are Canada is part of Western Europe and Canada as one of the sub-regions under international.
Oh, interesting. See, I would have thought Canada would be lumped in with a North American market with the United States, but it's not. We are put in with Europe. Why is that?
Yeah. I mean, it's gone through different models. I mean, Allergan through its years has reported or been part of like a US/Canada, North America type structure. More recently, until the AbbVie acquisition, it was part of LATCAN, so Latin America and Canada. And then with AbbVie, it's moved into the WEC region or Western Europe and Canada. So it gets bounced around. And listen, Canada's one of those countries that kind of falls in between. There's a lot of similarities, obviously, with the U.S. There are some similarities with Europe as well. So, often Canada and different organizations, I've seen it under both structures. So yeah, it really depends on the organization and what the flavor is at the time and what the thinking is at the time. Both have their positives and drawbacks as well. I mean, when you look at the U.S., it's obviously a very big country, and so Canada's 1/10, if that, sometimes depending of the size of the market. So sometimes they can get lost in that shuffle of the big U.S. market. Europe, there's time zone challenges, but then there's also the differences of I think there's similarities at times. Well, in different markets, they could be like at pharmaceuticals. They're more payer. There's a lot more similarities in terms of the payer markets, and as well, it's different countries with different cultures, languages, etc. So there's a little more recognition of some of the differences as well. So there's a benefit of the region having recognition of that. So it's depends on what the organization's feeling, what makes sense at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I find it interesting. I mean, Allergan is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, company in the aesthetics market.
That's
Would
right.
you agree?
Yeah.
And it probably is one of the most influential as well, obviously, worldwide in terms of what we do in aesthetics and how aesthetic trends are put forward. So how you divide the markets internally, is that something reflective of how you view the global markets, or is it just simply an organization for sales?
I wouldn't say necessarily for sales, but I think it's an organizational discussion of what makes sense for, a variety of different inputs. And I think under the AbbVie, I think there was also a thinking of trying to align the regions to the AbbVie structure as well. So Canada is part of the WEC region and the AbbVie structure. So I think there was, the twinning of that for Allergan as well.
Now, Allergan was an independent company, and it was purchased by AbbVie over a year ago. Is that correct? Well, it would have been a year and a
Yeah.
half ago, I think.
It was the intention, and the deal was struck exactly over a year ago, but it actually only closed in May of this year. So after going through the anti-competition reviews, et cetera, and basically the process to deal close, it became official as of May of this year. So that was only what, 7 months ago, 8 months ago, 7 months ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So it's been more recent, and up until that point, there's only limited information that can be shared. There's the intention; they remain as separate companies. You have to also maintain that the competitive barriers to make sure that you're not sharing information. Because I've seen it in another company where the deal fell through literally weeks before the close. So you want to make sure that you're not sharing competitive confidential information, because the deals sometimes do fall apart be it right before they close.
Yeah, and Allergan is such a strong company. It's such a strong internal culture in aesthetics, and like I said, it has just influenced aesthetics so incredibly well. Was there ever a thought that by selling the company or having it being purchased by a non-aesthetics company, that there would be some change in the way the company could proceed with how it organizes itself, as well as how it does influence the aesthetic market?
Yeah, I mean, well, a couple of things there. So I would say, Allergan was purchased by activists. What is that? 3 years ago, 2017, I believe, roughly around that time, and it underwent a bunch of changes at that point. I think actually under the AbbVie acquisition, there's more opportunity to actually see increased focus on aesthetics specifically. So despite AbbVie being a very large company, obviously one of the biggest, top 10, and um, it's purchased Allergan Aesthetics or Allergan, and then it's incorporated a lot of the specialty eye care stuff into the AbbVie side. It's carved out aesthetics as a standalone company under AbbVie. So it's an AbbVie company, but it's actually put pure focus on the aesthetic side, which I think is really great. That's actually what attracted me to the organization, is that it's not just, rolled in with all the others, which is, not a bad thing, but having that increased focus on aesthetics and having that, carve out in its own structure underneath the AbbVie umbrella, allows that more concentrated effort and focus in aesthetic, which I think has been lacking, to be honest, over the past couple of years. So I think this is an opportunity. But also the benefit as well is on stuff like investment in Allergan Aesthetics. I can tell you that AbbVie is very keen on diversifying its portfolio, growing in areas where they see opportunity, of which aesthetics is one of them. So as you well aware, better than me, being more new to this market than me, Allergan, as you mentioned, was a pioneer in the aesthetic space, right? And you think about Botox, you think about the plastic side, et cetera. And that's what's really helped us become the largest aesthetics company. But it's also about where do we go from here? And that's where AbbVie is very, very keen, very interested in continuing to grow, continuing to be on the forefront, not just in the spaces that we're in currently, but actually in the new spaces. Where is the aesthetics market going and how do we be on the leading edge of that as well in terms of innovations, products, etc. I can say, when they were looking at our portfolio, but then even more so in terms of R&D, one of the big things they were asking is, what else can we invest in? Whether it be, development programs or even other companies that we want to grow our portfolio as well. So a very, very keen interest with AbbVie to grow the aesthetics business even further. And the nice thing with AbbVie is that they've got deeper pockets. So that'll be nice to be able to leverage that for further R&D and further portfolio diversification.
Yeah, are we allowed to talk about the future and the directions? Normally, Eric, this is kind of the conversation that we get to later on in the in the interview, but this is naturally going in that direction, and I think it'd be great to ask you about what direction you think the R&D is going to take you. I've asked some of the other guests we've had on, and understandably, people aren't so forthcoming. Now, Allergan is just such a massive company and has had such great influence on the aesthetic market. But I wonder what's next for Allergan. Obviously, the injectables world is dominated by Allergan, both on the neuromodulators, which is what Botox is, and as well as the filler market with the whole line of Juvederm. Like, what's next? I mean, that market seems so massive and so saturated. You guys had a brilliant product in your Cool Sculpting, and that, I think that's your only medical device, is it not?
No, we have several. I mean, we have obviously implants as well, and which are medical devices, and we have other products. Tissue, as you know.
Well, I just meant energy devices.
Sure. And actually, we are looking at expanding the portfolio in that range. And so one thing I have to be careful about, and may also be, in your other interviews, it may be that there was restrictions in terms of what you can talk about as well, because I can't talk about specific products because, they haven't been approved in Canada. So that's considered off-label promotion. So I've got to be careful about that. But directionally, we're looking to expand in our body contouring space, so the Cool Sculpting and evolving that as well. And that we're looking in shorter, time frame in terms of the portfolio expansion there. But also, globally, we recently acquired a company, Luminara, which is in, again, the filler space. So combining, HA with calcium. You have to help me with the name here. Hydroxyapatite. That's it. I don't know how to pronounce it properly yet. It's still so new in terms of the acquisition, so still getting my mouth around that one. So that's a combination product that was recently acquired, but again, don't know the time frame for Canada. And what I would say in terms of those real next hot areas, those are in the works right now. And again, I can't speak too much about it at this point, but definitely those are the areas that we're looking to heavy up in terms of how do we develop, pioneer products in those spaces, not just the Me Too's.
Yeah, I mean, the body contouring market is definitely one of the fastest growing areas in plastic surgery, if not the fastest. You guys have really done well with Cool Sculpting and Cool Tone. I'm just not sure what's next in body sculpting. Is it the RF market, which is radio frequency, that seems to be saturated as well with products that do radio frequency for skin tightening. And I don't think you guys have entered that world, but is there much more to be explored in non-surgical body contouring?
Let me turn this question around to you. I mean, you're the expert. You see this day in, day out. What areas should we be looking at? I'd love to get your perspective on that to say, these are the hot areas. If we can find solutions in these areas, or if you know of product ideas, areas to explore, would love to hear that as well.
I mean, I got a lot of ideas, but it's science fiction for me. I mean, I can come up with ideas. I can't tell you how to make it work. But it is the body contouring and the whole non-surgical part of aesthetics. I just find fascinating. I mean, I've been in this world for 2 decades now. And I can tell you, I tell people this all the time. When I started out, the mentality was really that people would go into non-surgical treatments as a way of kind of holding off until they were ready for some kind of surgical treatment. And so really the mentality when I remember a decade ago, 15 years ago, the mentality was that there was a progression towards ultimately having surgery, whether it's you do fillers and Botox until you're ready for a facelift, or you do something else until you're ready for an abdominoplasty or liposuction. But I think people's mentalities have really changed now, and it's not really looked at as a progression. The non-surgical options are really looked at as kind of a thing unto themselves. And a lot of those options have gotten so good that you really have people who just want a non-surgical option because it's a non-surgical option, and they're never going to kind of progress. And so I think that's one of the reasons why the whole non-surgical market has developed and gotten so big, is that we understand that it's not necessarily a progression towards surgery. It's in fact maybe the other way around. It's that people prefer not having surgery, and there's good options out there for people.
Yeah, exactly. It can be and right. It could be in complement to or a standalone as well, which we're seeing. And when we look at our patient segments or our customer segments in terms of the consumers, we see two categories, that primary categories. If I'm taking very broad strokes, there's the positive aging that that are thinking about how do they not combat but enhance as they positively age. And then also, I guess more recently, and then it's not that recent anymore, but the beautification category, where the younger generation are looking to maybe enhance something and not necessarily address an aging issue so much as just enhance something that they want to feel more confident about. So we really do see two distinct categories there in terms of the product offering.
That is a great point, that there's been a remarkable shift towards younger people having treatments, and those patients really want reversible treatments. I would say that things that are not permanent, and quite honestly, a lot of the things that younger patients lean towards tend to be kind of trendy or fad-like, and I think that's a lot of what the filler market has become. It's a certain type of look or a certain type of kind of outcome somebody wants, but not necessarily something permanent.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, knowing that there's a time frame, and that, or even in cases reversible, that gives people maybe a little more assurance that that it's a less risk involved with it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how that's really been paralleled with the rise of social media and aesthetic surgery. And how you wonder which kind of what's leading, which is the horse leading the cart? Is it the social media that's kind of leading these trends, or is it the trends that are really well suited for social media? I don't know.
I have my thoughts. I'm not sure they're right. I'm newer to this space, but I definitely think there's been
tell me your thoughts. Yeah.
Well, I think the influence. I mean, I look to certain celebrities that have really driven this this uptake, and of course the Kardashians are often referenced, right, as being the trendsetters. And what might have been seen as, I don't want to say outlandish, because I don't think it's outlandish, but maybe not a norm in the past, has become mainstream, right? And I think that has been, there's been people out there that have led the charge in that space. So I think it's been some individuals, some high profile individuals really leading the trends on that.
Do you think those trends will change when the next social media trend comes up? Do you think that social media is that big of an influence on aesthetics that the next social media outlet that comes up will be excuse me, will be well suited for a different type of aesthetic trend?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's so much the outlet per se, so much as what's in vogue, so to speak. What are the people that all of a sudden become? It's like fashion, right? Who are the ones influencing, and then that might change. Something else I learned that I thought was quite interesting as well when I joined Allergan and learned more about the aesthetic space was the cultural differences as well. Like when you go to country, there are huge differences in terms of what the population's looking for, what the patient's looking for. And I was given an example where, North America, the trend is typically to look, enhancements without looking overdone, quote unquote, right? It's still keeping and maintaining a natural perspective. But other countries, and Russia's an example, where it's actually a symbol of status if you can get these procedures. So they tend to go on the more noticeable, and they want to be seen that they've had some work done, because it shows that you can afford to. So there's these huge cultural differences as well when you go around the world. So I thought those were quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you're touching on topics I love talking about. I think exploring the role of culture, and I would even say ethnicity a little bit, and how that influences aesthetics and our aesthetic sense is, I think that's fascinating. And I don't think you can separate it. I mean, part of that is the culture of what people want, but then it's also the expectations of what they want and the expectations of how they want to look. So for a big company like Allergan, again, how do you look at the world, and how do you kind of divvy up all of the global trends? Because as you say, you've got so many different trends that are popular in the world. You have trends in South America, you got trends in Asia and Europe, and how do you kind of view that?
Well, I think it's also a recognition that there are those differences. So even when you might be lumped in from a regional perspective, I think there's a recognition that countries differ, and you have to be able to adapt. I don't think there's a one size fits all that you can apply around the world. Or if you do, it's going to be quite limiting and not recognizing those differences. So I think having expertise on the ground, knowledge on the ground, is really important to understand and be able to adapt appropriately to what the local needs are, whether it be from the customers like yourself, whether it be from the patient side or the consumer side, et cetera, and being able to adapt strategies, adapt programs, and be able to tailor the offerings appropriately to meet the customer needs, I think is really, really critical.
Yeah.
I'm actually curious about trends that you're seeing. I mean, obviously we've had a huge year with COVID and mask wearing and the Zoom face where you're staring at yourself all the time. What are the trends that you're seeing in practice? I mean, are you seeing an increased desire, or any shifting in terms of the types of treatments people are looking for?
Well, I mean, I think it almost kind of, what I see is that you've kind of split off into the trend towards non-surgical and minimally invasive, which is really big, and I don't think that's new. I think that's been going on for a while, but that has really, I think that's really grown, and I think, like I said, you have people who really feel that the non-surgical options are much, much more accessible to the average client or patient, and what they want in their goals than surgery ever was. And so that really has kind of become more accessible to people. And I think that's great if that's really what people want and that's what their expectations are. I think on the surgical side, like the surgeries become, the people who go towards surgery tend to go for far more invasive surgeries. It seems like you've kind of gone off into either we're going towards polarization. Either we're going towards really minimally invasive, reversible procedures that people really now, I hate to say it this way, but I'll take a step back. Again, I remember when I started out in this field, and I would see patients and we would do consults. Even something like Botox, I remember those consultations would take so long where we'd talk to patients about Botox and what it was and consent about Botox, and somebody really be thinking about it for a long time, and then they'd go away and come back, and it was really it was really taken seriously, and as it should. I mean, now it's so accessible, and the average person who comes in is already just so knowledgeable about these options, just worlds ahead of what they used to be, that I'm not trying to minimize this, but it's almost like people look at this like a haircut and color, where this is, it's something that's so casual right now that they really do view it as a reversible thing that they're very knowledgeable about already. And they're happy to go to multiple providers. They've got lots of different options out there. And
I think there's more opportunity to expand that as well. And that's something, you know, in Canada, we're really putting a focus on is two elements. I mean, it's really, you know, creating that awareness, but also creating the acceptance of this, the destigmatization of aesthetics procedures. You know, it was always hush, hush, you know, go back several decades and, you know, did she, is that what's been done? You know, you saw that with celebrities, but you also heard it in the rumor mills, you know, and it was always this thing that you never wanted to admit. And I don't agree with that at all, right? I think this is about something about you're giving people confidence. You're letting people live the best versions of themselves. And so what's wrong with that? I don't think we should be, as patients, as companies, as well, clinicians, should we be embarrassed about that? I don't think so. And so that's something I think we want to have an impact on. You know, we're actually investing quite significantly on creating awareness and trying to normalize this positively, because again, we don't think it's something that's bad. We think it's something that, you know, empowering people, empowering patients, giving them confidence. We think that's actually a great thing. So it's also something for me that's important, is having an impact. And I've seen it firsthand. I researched before joining Allergan, but also seen it through training, but also you know, live sessions, and the impact that it can have. I mean, you must see this daily in terms of being able to you know, unveil, or so to speak, or see the results after something, and you know, the emotions that you can see in some patients. It's incredible, the impact. And you know, there's a lot going on there in terms of, you know, there might be something that they weren't confident about, or something that they had a self-consciousness about, that it's powerful when you see the impact on their lives that you can have, whether it be through, you know, surgical procedures, whether it can be through you know, injectables, whatever. It's having impact on people's lives.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I just think right now, people are so knowledgeable and so savvy when it comes down to options. Like I said, just exponentially more so than even a few years ago. And I think that's part of what social media has done. It's really made this so commonplace and so make people so aware of what options are out there. And people are so used to seeing it that they do recognize. And I think that there is a backlash towards people who downplay it purposefully, like the whole Jennifer Lopez controversy about using olive oil as. I think that's a reflective of people saying, yeah, you know, let's be honest here. Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to say you don't want to do it, but let's be honest, and let's give people kind of honest opinions, and really let's not try to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. And I think that's right. I mean, I think it's important for people to be honest about what their expectations are and what they think that they can achieve, and what options really can help them if they want. And then it's their decision if they want to go forth with them.
Yeah, agree. It makes a lot of sense.
But I do think social media has really influenced, obviously the filler market for sure, but the whole non-surgical market has become so incredibly swayed by how accessible social media has made it all.
Mm-hmm. And it's actually interesting too. I mean, this is the first category I've been where, you know, the physicians are so active in social media. I mean, that's to your point. It's where you communicate with your potential patients, right? So, and your existing patients as well. So it's incredible to see the presence, the savviness that's there, versus other areas within medicine or pharmaceuticals, etc.
Yeah, I mean, that in some ways is a very democratic thing. I think that social media has made physicians and medicine and this whole aesthetics industry more directly accessible to people on a one-to-one. And, you know, even, I mean, I'm not great on social media, but I do find that more than ever, I can interact with, excuse me, more than ever, I can interact with my patients directly. And, whereas physicians are used to, especially specialists, we're not used to interacting directly. You're used to getting a referral or having, the gatekeepers to medicine traditionally have been primary care people. And so patients kind of going through some kind of primary care physician to get to a specialist, whereas now it's, you're directly interacting with people and answering their questions and educating them and kind of showing them your work directly.
Yeah. It's a different engagement model, like you're saying. I mean, it's in many cases, not all, but it's elective procedures, right? So it's different versus the medically necessary, which, has that more traditional pathway in terms of getting to, specialists, especially in particular. But that is a different community. It actually more reminds me of even like the US model where, they're businesses as well. And they're also trying to, in their practices, bring patients in. So there is a communication that they have to, put forth and also an engagement, there's patient satisfaction, et cetera, that has to really be present in the US because it is more of a pull model that they're trying to pull to. And they've got more competition down there as well. And I see similarities in this market, right?
Yeah. So can I ask you this? This leads to a great, I think, a great topic of discussion as well. Can I ask you about regulations and what your thoughts are on how we get regulated on social media and on information about aesthetics? Because traditionally, the regulations that surround aesthetics and aesthetic products is similar to other areas of medicine, and for good measure. I think, for instance, we don't want people advertising that they preferentially use one type of hypercholesterol medication over another. I think that's a little bit inappropriate. But in aesthetics, it's different because these products, they are different and people do have preferences, legitimate preferences. And there are reasons why somebody prefers to use one product over another. And in some ways, it's not clear to me whether it's appropriate to say that and be open about that. So do you think that we should regulate how we educate the public about our aesthetic use of products differently?
What I will say, that's a tough one. I mean, I got to be careful about what I say on that one. There's opinion versus reality too, right? And
we just want opinion. We're separated from reality here.
Yeah. Well, let's lay the foundation because I do think that, I know we are regulated, as a company, as an industry company, we definitely are subject to the regulations of advertising as it relates to both prescription products, which are even more tight regulations, and then medical devices, which has a bit more allowances, but still there's regulation. And that there's good reason for that too, in terms of ensuring fair balance, ensuring that the appropriate claims are made, et cetera, that you're not misrepresenting because they're still medical procedures, right? So we want to make sure that they're being positioned appropriately. So I get that, and I fully understand that. And I think it's appropriate. Where we see then, it starts to blur is when, we start to see, to your point, at the customer, the clinician, surgeon level, and talking about that. Should they be subject to the same regulations and the way it's been discussed? I'll maybe leave that one for you to answer in terms of because it's not my area. I do get though from like if I look even across competitors, et cetera, that are talking it, I want to make sure that it's appropriate, right? Number one, that they're representing appropriately, that there's data to back it up, et cetera. There's a fair balance where necessary, et cetera, so that it's substantiated, right? And it's a fair communication versus opinion that could be, that could be more subjective, et cetera. That's what, at least on the industry side, I think it helps make sure that there's appropriate communication channels. Are there other models? Yeah, I think there's other models. Like if you look in Canada, on the prescription side, it's quite strict, right? It can be quite limiting what you can actually say. You can't make a claim, a product claim, with a brand name at the same time, right? You have to separate. You can have brand, price, and quantity, and one, and then anything. You can't even say what it's for necessarily, right? Or not necessarily. You can't say what it's for. So you have to separate that. And if you're advertising a prescription drug, you can talk about the brand. Can't say what it's for. You can say what it costs, and you can say what size it is, and that's basically it, which is very limiting. Could we expand that? I mean, that takes a whole drug act change, etc., and advertising changes, which I think is a long haul. Would there be benefit? I think there's opportunity. I mean, look at the U.S. They have a lot more leeway in terms of what they say, but they also have to balance that, and that's when you get those major ads with all the potential side effects, which can scare people away. So is that good either? There's probably a nice medium in between. But is there opportunity to talk more about it? I think there is, but of course we have to stick within the regulations that we're in right now, of course.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We got to stick to the regulations, but it's just interesting as to kind of how it plays out, because it is different when you're talking about, let's say again, a blood pressure medication, and if you have physicians who, for instance, I don't think you want physicians out there on social media talking about, I prefer this blood pressure medication, or I mean, it's just far too complicated, and there's a lot of factors that play into it. And in aesthetics, however, there are distinct preferences. Like in the filler market, for instance, certain types of fillers, a practitioner will have strong preferences about a type of filler for a certain situation. And in fact, I'd go so far as to say patients or customers also have strong preferences. And many times you have people coming in who are very, very knowledgeable about these options, and they know what their preferences are, and they're actually choosing a practitioner based on what that practitioner's preferences are. And I think if we look at those two categories as being the same, we're totally underestimating the awareness and the savvy of the typical person who is pursuing these options. I think we're not giving them enough credit to be able to make decisions and understand the options. That's a little bit of a generalization, but I think I'm just trying to illustrate that I have a hard time with regulations that don't differentiate and look to treat everything the same.
Yeah, and it's fair. And also, like you're saying, the modes of communications are changing rapidly, and I don't think our regulations have necessarily kept up with the changing times, the different modalities, etc. So I think that's absolutely fair. And, knowing how to change these types of things, it's such a long process. But by the time we change this, I think they'll already be out of date by the time they're modified. But anyway, it's
and the other. I mean, that's a good point. And the other part of it is it's such a global market now. I mean, really, like it's kind of foolish to think that when we're advertising to patients or educating our patients, we're sticking to the small geographical area that we're in. I mean, nothing is limited to that geographical area. I mean, anybody who's on social media knows that you've got people from across the world that are following you, and even patients here, they're not necessarily just following the few people that are in their geographical area. They maybe follow me, and then they follow somebody in Los Angeles and somebody in Brazil and somebody in London, and all those people have different regulations and that they're following, and it's not uniform, and so it seems a little silly to have geographically specific regulations, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, I absolutely get you. And I mean, we've been dealing with this with television advertising forever, right? The U.S. advertising coming over to Canada, and I hope we don't get to the stage, on the internet where you've got geo blocking. I just don't think that's realistic. I mean, obviously, there's certain countries that do that, but in the free world, hopefully, that we don't see that happening. So I do think we need to, we need some people smarter than me to get around the table to try and sort out how to actually solve for this. How do we actually address this issue from a regulations perspective to factor that, there are these differences and that there aren't the borders in terms of these communication channels. I think it's absolutely a good point.
Yeah. So, Eric, tell me a bit about yourself coming into this role. I thought it was interesting that you're in such a prominent role, but you're new to the aesthetics industry. It's a little bit different than what we typically see, which is somebody who's kind of born and bred within a company and rises up and then kind of achieves a high leadership position. You are obviously skilled and talented. You've won numerous awards. I think I saw in here that you were in some kind of Hall of Fame. I don't know what it was, but you
Canadian Marketing Hall of Fame.
I mean, that's impressive.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, so yes, I didn't come from or wasn't born and raised in the aesthetic space. I've seen some similarities. I mean, I'll give you a little bit of my backstory. I actually started as a sales representative in the ophthalmology space in Vancouver. I covered all of BC. This is back in the 90s. And actually, Jean Carruthers was on my target list as one of my customers I was supposed to visit. Now, my products didn't really relate to what she was doing, so I didn't connect with her that much. But I was very aware. This is in the early days, obviously, when Botox was just being explored in studies for the cosmetic use. So was keenly aware of that going on. And then I rose through different organizations and commercial roles of sales, marketing, and whatnot. And then spent a lot of time in ophthalmology, which I think has some similarities to the aesthetics market in that you got medical device, you got surgery, you've got different aspects that can be business to business as well, with some of the products that are sellable through some of the ophthalmologists or optometrists. So I saw some similarities from that perspective. So I've keenly watched them, and I used to compete against Allergan in the ophthalmology space. So I was always aware of Allergan, always aware of the aesthetic side. And then when my last role was at a company called Shire that was dealing with neuroscience, gastroenterology, rare disease. And then we were bought by a company called Takeda, a big Japanese company. And then I had an opportunity to look for a new opportunity. And I sought out Allergan because of my interest, knowing the organization and the aesthetic space specifically, because it is interesting to me from a business model perspective of being that business to consumer type model. The different, it was different from what I had done, which I thought was really interesting. The communication vehicles that, we play in a lot more, like the direct to consumer side. The fact that we had device, space, as well as drug, as well as others as well in terms of health products. So I thought the diversity, the challenges in the space, the growth in this space, the trending in the space, and the customer base, quite honestly, it's a really interesting customer base as well. That connection, that closeness that you develop with between industry partners and clinicians, because you have to have that partnership from an education perspective, but there is that business to business aspect as well. So you have to make sure that that's running smoothly. I found it really fascinating. So that's how I kind of came to Allergan.
Yeah, and how do you find the transition?
Well, I'm not going to lie. When I joined Allergan, it was day one of an integration, and it was amidst the pandemic lockdown. So very, very different experience than what I've experienced in the past. There's still people on the team that I haven't met in person. I've maybe seen on a video call, but that's our reality today. Even though our office, we come in, not everyone comes in, and I haven't been able to get out and meet the team or even meet many customers face to face. I've had Zoom calls as well, but it's very different in terms of, onboarding and starting with a new company that way. So there's definitely been some challenges, but also been a lot of excitement. We're going through an integration. I mentioned in terms of the benefits I see with that integration, with that increased focus on aesthetics, which I think will be really helpful. In terms of the R&D investment that we're going to be looking at. We have a number of product launches in the short horizon. So it's been exciting, not without its challenges, like I mentioned, but exciting. And I'm not going to lie, I'm looking forward to the holiday break to rest a bit too.
So have you been, I'm sure you have, but have you been welcomed with open arms? As somebody who is a little bit of an outsider to the industry, do people kind of welcome you in, or do view you as a little bit with a little bit of skepticism.
Well, to my face, they welcomed me nicely. I don't know exactly what's happening behind my back. I'm joking, but I have to say it's been actually quite refreshing. It's been really. I was worried about that, quite honestly. I know this is a tight knit community, right? A lot of people have been here for a long time, whether it be obviously on the surgeon clinician side, but also on the industry side. There are many people that have been around for a long time. So I was wondering how I was going to be received. But I've been really, really welcomed with open arms from what I can see, and appreciative of that. So yeah, they've been giving me the benefit of the doubt, and hopefully I'm making a positive impact. But a lot more to do as well to make sure that we continue to do well by customers and by patients.
Yeah. When we last chatted, we talked a lot about corporate culture, and when I've chatted with other CEOs and other leaders, that's always such a big part of our discussion. And it seems to me, as a leader and a corporate leader, culture is like a huge part of what you're trying to establish. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Walking into a situation where really you're trying to learn both the industry and the company, is it hard to have an impact on culture, or do you need to have an impact? Is it already a strong culture that's established?
Yeah, I think we've gone through a lot of change as Allergan. I mean, being fully transparent over the past 2 years, I think starting with the acquisition of Allergan by activists several years ago, Allergan in Canada has been going through a lot of change, right? And there's been transformation that's been happening, changes of ways of working. So I think there has been change culturally, operationally, etc. That's been there. So me coming in was another change, recognizing that. But I think I recognize that, and I think addressing culture is one of the first things. Wanted to make sure not to change the culture, but just to make sure that we're establishing a strong culture for Allergan Aesthetics in Canada, and then part of AbbVie as well. We briefly mentioned this when we talked last time, but I am a big believer. I think culture. I think I quoted Peter Drucker about culture eats strategy for breakfast. Right? It's you can have the best strategies, but if you have bad culture, long term you're not going to win out. If you have a great culture and a mediocre strategy, you can do wonders. Like it really does trump, and it's really, really important. So that is critically important to establish and really entrench. I have found it more challenging in terms of being able to connect with people, meet people, like I talked about, just because of the remoteness and the nature of working right now. But it's not a major hurdle, but it's definitely put maybe some of the timelines to establish that a bit longer. Some additional challenges where you have to work harder to find those ways. But I do think it's critically important. So that's been a big part of the focus for these first few months.
And how do you go about doing that? I mean, I hate to kind of keep harping on it, but I think culture is something that obviously you've got a huge company, but even somebody who's got a small business struggles with the establishment of a culture of a positive culture, a culture that's going to drive their employees to want to work hard and be successful and treat their customers with great respect. How do you make sure that is a foundational aspect of the business?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple elements and different angles to address this by. Number one, I think it's setting the direction, understanding where you want to go from a culture and being able to articulate that. And that starts with building, what that looks like. And I think there's a top-down approach where we can say, okay, here's a culture, and now we're going to live this, which I don't think you get great buy-in, or you can get some buy-in, but I don't think you're going to get broad buy-in. I think it's also it's important to understand, a bottoms-up approach as well. What's important to people? What do we want to do as an organization, and involving people in building that aspiration, where we want to go, what's important to us as an organization as well. What are the things that we think are important in our ways of working, and really defining that. So it does not necessarily everyone, if you can get a broad perspective and then synthesize that and build that, I think you get better buy-in in terms of, what that looks, or, adoption longer term. So then being able to clearly define what's important to the organization and to the company, to say, here is the important elements in terms of, whether it be collaboration, whether it be, openness and honesty, whether it be transparency and those different elements and whatever it is, making sure that those are clear, and then communicating that and making sure that people understand this is what we aspire to, and ensuring that people understand that. And then it's living it. I think that's the big element as well, is walking the talk as well. And actually not just putting that up and, coming back and revisiting it every whatever months. It's actually embedding that in terms of whether it be everyday communications, whether it be in meetings, whether it be in whatever touch point you have, is really holding those at the forefront and making sure. Now, listen, you're not going to be perfect all the time in terms of being able to live those cultural elements every single time. But it's, if you know it and you've all agreed to it, then you can hold people to account and call people out if they're not living up to those cultural elements as well. And if you have an open culture, then people are okay with addressing that and actually making sure that we're reinforcing those behaviors and ways of working that as an organization we aspire to.
Yeah, I think you guys have done an outstanding job, really. And I think one of the things that I've seen that maybe it helps with Allergan is how much you've focused on education, the whole educational kind of component of aesthetics. And I think how you guys interact with both the public as well as practitioners and provide educational experiences is, I can't help but imagine that has really developed a strong internal culture for you too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's the value offerings, right? And like, how do we create value in those partnerships, whether it be through education, whether it be through, raising awareness, growing that overall awareness throughout the market. I think hopefully those are elements that you appreciate on the other side that, we see as working together to grow the overall market, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, do you find Allergan is, my understanding is it has a division of Allergan Breast and Allergan Face. So the products related to face obviously go into the face market, and then the breast covers the whole breast implant market. Have you seen kind of distinct changes in the breast implant market over the past couple of years, particularly?
That's a loaded question, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of. I guess so.
Yeah. There's been an evolution for sure. Of course, with some of the, obviously the challenges in the breast market. So, certainly we've seen a change in the product types that are being used. Our breast category is called our plastics and regenerative medicines. So we have both the plastics, which is the plastic surgery breast side, but then we also have regenerative medicine with some tissue side and other devices as well. So unfortunately in Canada, that's still a sizable market for us that we still have presence. Obviously, it was challenging times as well. I mean, we can't sugarcoat it. It was a challenging past couple of years on that side globally with respects to the breast side. I think we have to thank the partners for working through this with us, and know that it hasn't been ideal, and there's been trips certainly, but hopefully seeing the support and the discussions that we've had, and trying to support the industry as well, and the clinicians through this challenging time.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about your own culture, like your own Chinese culture?
That's a pivot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could go on forever, but I do want to get a chance. I love talking about personal culture and how it influenced us. And I know that you're a Canadian boy like me, but you're from Vancouver. You've got a Chinese background. How do you think that's kind of influenced you, and where it's kind of led you to where you are today? And I mean, you can talk about it in the aesthetic market if you want, but even in terms of your position in leadership.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I was a kid, I mean, so just maybe separate, my father was an immigrant from China, and came over to go to med school in Canada. And my mom is, I always get this mixed up in terms of generations. I don't, people have different definition. First generation is the one that comes over, or first generation is the first one born in Canada? How do you define it?
I thought it was the first generation is the one that's born.
Okay. So I would be first generation on my dad's side and third generation on my mom's side. So I say I average out to second generation between the two of them. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's the way I define it. Yeah, so my mom, doesn't speak Chinese, is not very familiar with the Chinese culture. It wasn't spoken at home for her, etc. So, didn't speak it at home. And my father speaks Chinese and came over from China. And so it's there, but at the same time, it's not there in terms of my exposure to that. And it's actually, I've had very few regrets in life, but one of my deep regrets is that I didn't learn Chinese as a kid. I mean, when I was growing up, I was going to French immersion school since preschool all the way to high school. And, I wanted to fit in with my peers at the time. And, it wasn't a very diversified group then. So I think having, embracing my culture at that time was not my interest. In fact, I did the opposite. I shunned it a bit just because I didn't want to stand out as being different when I was in those, formative years. That being said, I think, definitely had an influence on me when I look at my dad's approach and, the way he came over and his work ethic. I definitely think that instilled in me as well, watching that at home, despite shunning it publicly initially, and now trying to learn more about it and, be curious about that. And I think even me coming to terms with accepting my own culture and embracing it and celebrating that has been something educational about, accepting diversity. We don't have to conform, because that's the way I used to think when I was young. We don't all have to be the same. In fact, I think that's actually not a good thing. I think we actually need to embrace, whether it be diversity culture-wise or diversity thinking-wise. I think that makes stronger teams. I think that makes more interesting friends. I think that makes more interesting conversations. So, embracing diversity is definitely something that I think, again, not just culturally, but from many different aspects, is something that I take away from my own experience coming to terms with that. Because again, I wasn't always that way initially, because I didn't want to stand out. So I think that really helped me as a leader as well, because it opened up my eyes to that my initial thinking was incorrect.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how diversity has become such a strength now, and even when I was growing up, it was we were just so different. We were always considered so different, and I was a son of immigrants, and my parents had come to this country as really religious refugees, and we we were always considered so different. I grew up really feeling strongly that I was an outsider, and now in my position at the university, in my practice, it's funny to me how sometimes I'm viewed as like the norm or the insider, and it's and it's interesting how the past couple decades has seen such a acceptance of diversity to the point where the in some ways the norm is considered diverse.
Yeah, and I don't think we're fully there yet. I think there's definitely opportunity to continue that path, but we've come so far, and that is great to see. I totally agree. And I look at different companies, especially over the past year, as you're well aware, in terms of what's happened around the world, that it's even heightened, even more recently, right? And great to see that companies are putting this as actually, even in this day and age where we think it's the norm, putting even more emphasis on ensuring that there's that diversity and inclusion, which is great to see.
Do you guys do that in Allergan?
Yeah, I mean, it's become a big focus, not just at Allergan, but at AbbVie as well. Putting diversity officers at the very high level to ensure that we're culturally, making sure that this is a priority, putting in programs to make sure that we're including in our hiring practices, in our operating practices, making sure that this is top of mind, ensuring that very narrow thinking is not acceptable in the organization. So a lot of different initiatives that are being put in place. And again, not that they're brand new, it's enhancements because it has been the focus, but even putting more emphasis on it as an organization. It's a global priority, actually, right from our CEO.
Is that right? So, and what about encouraging female participation? Because I mean, the aesthetics industry is very strongly dominated for women in terms of they are by far the majority of the clients.
Yeah.
So how are you looking at encouraging more female leadership?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, from our employee base in Allergan Canada, or Allergan Aesthetics Canada, a majority are female. So it's actually maybe disproportionate on that side towards the female side, maybe because of the space, like you're saying. So I think we've got a well-diversified team from a male-female ratio. In fact, it's disproportionate to the female side.
Yeah. Do you think that whole exploration of diversity is something that is a trend in aesthetics? I mean, I hope so. I say this kind of hoping the answer is yes, and I personally have an interest in it. But looking at aesthetic standards as it relates to different diverse populations of people.
When you say it's a trend, I mean, I hope it's not a trend. I hope it's permanent. You know what I mean? I see an increase on it. And I hope that it's not just a trend that will fade away, so to speak, but actually is here to stay. And I have seen an increase, and even quite honestly, in our own organization, seeing increased diversity in our models and our advertising. And I think that only strengthens us. And I agree. I think it's a positive that I hope doesn't just blip up and blip down, but I do think it's here to stay for the longer term.
Yeah. Is that also related to how you view the global market?
No, I don't think it's just in the global markets either. I think it's even because we have specific campaigns can be modified to the local or created locally, and I think it's actually saying even within local markets, it's not just taking global assets and plug and play. It's actually ensuring that it's relevant, and I think that's actually the point, is that it is relevant for local markets as well.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear it. I mean, I think the more we can focus on that, especially in the aesthetics world, where we're talking about the different aesthetic goals and expectations of people of diverse backgrounds. It's just so important to explore that, and not just simply from a marketing perspective, but even really looking at what it is that different people are looking to achieve and how different options may be better suited for some people.
Yeah, exactly. We actually have a program just to talk about the female diversification, where there's the Flame program that we have, which is female leaders in aesthetics medicine. So it actually is taking some global female thought leaders and ensuring that we're tapping into that and helping tap into their expertise, but giving them platforms as well, where they can be thought leaders around the world, which they are. We're just, leveraging that from the female perspective, that, giving that stronger voice and hopefully amplifying that, because, to your point about them, the female being I don't want to say disproportionate, but heavily present, obviously, in this space, being important that they have that voice as well.
Yeah. So maybe can you talk a little bit more about innovation? So how are you guys exploring your R&D and what your next kind of set of innovative technologies are going to be?
So we have a whole R&D team globally that has a number of assets and development programs that they're looking at. I think you're asking what more specifically. I don't know if I can give you as much detail as you're looking for in terms of what areas we're really diving deep.
I'm trying to nail you down, Eric.
But like I said, we're actually expanding it as well. And from a process perspective, it's the internal development programs, but it's also on even on the M&A merger and acquisition perspective. Are there innovations that are further along that we can even bring in that might be further along the pathway that can come to market even sooner? So that's the two aspects: internal development and then business development, where you can actually bolster with because it takes a heck of a long time to develop products, right? And especially innovative products in untested areas and innovative areas. So if you can also partner with other ones that are, developing, innovation outside and bringing it in, that's also can accelerate that innovation.
And that was the case with Cool Sculpting, right?
Yes, exactly.
That was a merger.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that these are really great questions that we've had a chance to chat about. I was going to ask you a little bit about some personal questions for you as we start to kind of wind down. I've got some hot takes for you. I know you've got passion in woodworking, right? Yes. So tell me a little bit about that. How does that play into the whole leadership in an aesthetics world?
I don't know how to make the link to leadership in the aesthetics world, but what I would say is I love to create, and I love to take something that in its raw form and transform it into something, whether it be practical, beautiful, whatever it might be that I'm working on. So to see that transformation, I don't know if you see parallels to your work you do and taking something in a different state and then transforming it as well. But I get great satisfaction out of that. So, and taking something that can seem, it sounds, I don't know how to phrase this. I love raw wood. Like when you're looking at it, the grain and this, like it just, you see possibilities there and just the uniqueness of this natural product. I just think, I don't know, I'm fascinated by it and all these different types. And there's so many different types of wood locally, but also, from around the world, and the differences in the colors or the shapes and the patterns. It's just, it really does marvel me in terms of the diversity and the beauty that you can find within it. And then you can take that and transform it and even enhance it even more. It's just, I don't know, it's something that I love. And also just for me, it's also something about, focusing on something different as well. When you can take, you have these great hobbies that you can, remove yourself and recharge and throw yourself into something else for a bit. It gives me more energy when I get back to work or doing something different. So it's also my escape, but not escape, because I don't think I'm running away from something, but it's helping me be even better, in terms of at work and leading.
Yeah. What's your daily routine, Eric?
So I'm an early riser. I've become one. When I was, earlier in my life, I tended to be a night owl, but I've definitely shifted over to being an early riser. Every other day, I like to do some form of exercise, whether it be running or during between jobs. I joined my wife's boot camp, so I crashed it. I was the only guy for quite a while until COVID. Now I've seen a few husbands come in on the COVID side. We do either a workout or go for a run. And then have breakfast and then get to work. Spend the day at work and then I try and be home for dinner with the family. That's important to me, to spend the time with the family at least at a meal. And then typically there's a lot of emails to catch up on after work, and then it's to bed fairly early. I've learned myself that, if I spin for an hour at night because I'm tired, I can usually, get it done in 10 minutes in the morning. So I'd rather go to bed, wake up early and get it done rather than try and, spin on it late in the evening.
Well, that's great. What's your favorite Allergan product? Are you allowed to say?
Yeah, well, I haven't explored them that much. I haven't gone in to see anyone yet. So far it's been a Skin Medica product. I've been working on the TNS Essential Serum.
Are you using them?
Yeah, that's what I've started to use, but I haven't had any injections yet. I say yet. I'm still figuring out how to get that done. So with time.
Good. Who would you consider to be one of the biggest influences in your life professionally?
Professionally, I would actually say one of my old bosses, and she taught me so much about culture. I worked with her for probably 8 years. And I was very fortunate to start in my career under her leadership, and I saw that power of culture. So she really did teach me, and knowingly, I don't think she was conscious about it, but it was an unknowingly teaching me initially about that sense that you create with a team, that sense of belonging, that sense of wanting to do more for the organization because you felt that affinity towards it. So that was had a huge influence on me throughout my career.
Where do you think Allergan Canada will be in 5 years?
I think we're going to be even bigger in a positive way, not from a bureaucratic way in that sense and big machine, but I think we're going to be seen as, we've been the leader in this space, obviously for decades. And I think we're only going to entrench that position as we bring out more innovations, not only in products, but also hopefully in the ways that we're doing things and the ways that we're partnering as well. So really want to make sure that people want to do business with us and be partners with us. One thing I learned when coming in is that there's a strong affinity. People have, some people have told me they've grown up with Allergan in their careers, and that partnership, and they really appreciated that. And I hope we can even entrench that further, that people feel that they can continue to grow, or if they're newer, in their career or newer to aesthetics, that they feel like, hey, Allergan's the company we want to do business with because of, all the things that we do.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. I've asked everybody this. What is the global issue that's most important to you personally?
Quite honestly, it's COVID, and I know that sounds a bit, probably overdone and overplayed, but I think it's going to have a dramatic impact on the ways we do business. And I see it even right now in terms of, how do we engage our customers in a meaningful way, when we can't see them sometimes. And I don't think it's going to change. Like even when we have vaccines, I think, we're definitely going to see each other more, but I think it's going to permanently change the way we interact. So it's how we interact to make sure that we're providing value and having that good partnership in different ways. Whether it used to be a lot of face to face, maybe I definitely still think there's going to be face to face, but I think it's going to evolve as way that we have to think more creatively in terms of the ways we connect with our customers.
Great, Eric. It was a pleasure. I thank you so much. I think Allergan Canada is really lucky to have you at the helm. Maybe when all of this craziness ends and we've all got immunity, we can do this live and in person.
Would love that. Listen, really enjoyed the conversation, Dr. Yazdani. Appreciate it. And thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Eric. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.